We're here today with Professor Saman Amarasinghe, who's a professor in the Electrical Engineering and Computer Science Department at MIT. He's going to help us gain some insight into the PhD application process. Could you elaborate on some key aspects of the PhD application?
So, okay, when we get people for PhD, we have to figure out what we are trying to do. We are trying to take people to become researchers. It's all about research. So this is no longer about taking classes. It's no longer about basically doing exams. It's about innovation. Can you think about new things? Can you carry out research? So the evaluation process is all about, can you predict who can be the next big researcher? And the hard thing is, obviously until end of college, most people don't do any research. 10 years ago, when we get applications from people to become part of the PhD program, what they had was their classes. They took classes, they did a project or two in there, and that's all they had. Perhaps few universities like MIT and Stanford and Berkeley, they did, the undergraduates did some research, but rarely undergraduates were doing research in there. But about 10 years ago, undergraduates also started doing some research. So the implication there is, if they are already proven researchers, the risk for a place like MIT is much lower, because you know who's already a good researcher. So you don't have to look at their grades and try to figure out whether they will be a good researcher. So people who are doing research start getting a lot more traction. And about 5 years ago, they start hitting internationally. What do you mean doing by research? How do you evaluate research? Well, the main way to evaluate research is publications. Obviously grades matter. I mean, if somebody is, especially coming from a country like Sri Lanka, is not at the top, especially for a place like MIT, not at the top, it's not useful. Recommendations matter a lot, because what we are looking, especially in recommendations, is not to say that, okay, this person got this grade, because that we know already. Somebody who has some personal experience with this person. Not even say I took their classes, but things like research gives a lot more intimate experience with the faculty member. They have spent time with their, know something, so a recommendation that can speak to those has a lot more value than anything. To get to a top conference sometimes is hard. One thing I suggest to people is, first of all, go look at in the web and see what people at top universities are doing. Every professor has a web page, or every professor has a list of publications. That kind of probably indicates where that professor is going. A lot of those conferences have workshops around them. Those workshops also are attended by the people who go to conference. And workshop acceptance rates are much higher.
So in terms of research, Sri Lankan undergrads do have some challenges that are not really faced by people in the US.
So I think this is very interesting. So when I first came to US, I came as undergrad. I was at University of Morocco for a little while when I came. And this is in mid-80s. And there, at that time, there's a big difference coming from Sri Lanka here. In US, I had access to a library that is probably 100 times larger than the engineering library itself, where I went to college at Cornell. It was 100 times larger than anything in Morocco. And they had every possible consumer book in there. I had access to $1 million computers and all these things, whereas at that time in University of Morocco, they had this Sinclair Spectrum $200 small like toys basically in there. And every time I wanted paper, all those, in Sri Lanka, there's stacks and stacks of all the research papers. I could go look at that. So that was an amazing advantage. Sri Lanka didn't have that. But let's look at what's happened now. What computer I use? I use a PC. Okay. Every Sri Lankan student probably have a computer probably as powerful as I do. I mean, yes, I have some servers once in a while I use, but most of the time it's the same thing. If I want a paper, what do? I go to the internet. Okay, I don't go to a library anymore. And anybody from Sri Lanka can have access to that. So in some sense, a lot of these kind of gap has narrowed. What are the advantages you have in Sri Lanka? Okay. And what you can look at is not what you don't have in Sri Lanka, but what you do. Okay. There are a lot of places, like for example, if you are in Sri Lanka, like research in tropical things. So if you are in chemistry or biology, it's under tropical diseases, tropical, there are a lot of interesting things in that tropics provide in there. We are in a developing country that provide a lot of different types of things. So there are things like that you can look at and say, okay, don't try to just directly compete with me, but find something that is local, that can impress us, because there are things that we can do. So the key thing is to find a research problem. In fact, if you look at a PhD, what do a PhD gain? PhD is not about doing the research. Most of a good PhD is about choosing problems. I mean, you have to select something unique, you have to select something technically interesting, you have to select something hard enough, but also solvable. So even as an undergrad, I would say it's not about just jumping into the first problem. Trying to have some impact of finding a problem.
Is there a reason that you haven't seen too many Sri Lankan graduate students getting accepted to US universities?
In fact, in my perspective, so I see admissions to computer science. Not this year admissions, last year's actually Sri Lanka did extremely well. There were 3 University of Moratuwa students admitted to MIT. We admit in computer science about, I think about 80 students out of the 3 from from Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka, in fact, came as the 8th top country in the list of countries. Of course, US is the top, Canada, India, China, those countries in there. But after those, I mean, being 8th country, and that was, I think, a pretty great achievement in there. So it's not, I think, Sri Lankan students are not getting in certain areas, certain fields, they are getting it. I think the other part of that is also coming from Sri Lanka. There's this notion about unknown. Okay? Getting into a university first time for the first student is probably very hard because you have to evaluate. And when you evaluate something, if you don't know the university, if you don't know the people who write the recommendations, it's very high, it's a much bigger risk. Now, at least in MIT Computer Science, we have had enough Sri Lankans. We have had what, like 8 people right now? At that point, things are becoming easier. Because first of all, what we do is, we know the performance of the people who came. Fortunately, all the Sri Lankans have been doing extremely well. I mean, we have people who won the best thesis prize. One of the first Sri Lankans who came here won the best thesis prize out of all the PhDs. So something like that in that. And then also, these days, with a lot of data availability, we track everything, including who wrote recommendation previously, and what they say in recommendations. So when you have these people who got accepted, and the same people are writing recommendation for next level of people, you can easily compare. In Sri Lanka still we don't have culture of research, and so part of that is, I think, I mean, for example, certain fields like computer science, they have a lot of opportunities to, so they're not applying for going to do research. But my feeling is, if somebody want to go do a PhD, they should start thinking about it not in their senior year, probably a little bit earlier. Start some research in there. Create that portfolio that when you write about it, you can write something interesting in that.
What would be your recommendations for an undergrad, probably in, like, let's say the 3rd year or something in this undergrad program? What kind of steps can he take to start off his research? Like, how he can decide what the best area would be? And
so what I would say is, first, go figure out what the area you might want to select. I mean, this is a big decision. I mean, if you're successful, this is what you're going to spend the rest of your life doing, most of the time. People can switch, but for most people, that's what they're going to do, to spend the rest of the life doing. So do figure that out. Then go to web and do some research. Just do some general things, what happens in this area. Then identify a bunch of faculty members in non-universities in that area. Go to their website and see what they are doing. Look at their papers and look at their projects. Read a couple of those papers and see what they're doing. Identify conferences they are submitting. Go to the conference proceedings. Most of these places have conference proceedings available in there. Okay, so here's one clue in there. Lot of US conferences like IEEE and ACM and these kind of conferences won't let won't have the proceedings in the open if you go to conference. But almost every conference and journal let the faculty members or the students publish those proceedings in their websites. So you go to a thing, you don't find the conference, but if you will find the abstract and the name, go look at that person's personal website, and the paper is probably always there. There's only very few things that restrict that. So even though Sri Lankan universities might not have paid the huge sums to get the proceedings, you can have access to proceedings by going to the faculty members or students' website, authors' website. So go do that, look at it.
What do you think are the key skills that an undergrad should develop if they're planning to do research?
So research is very independent. Okay? They have to have positive attitude, everything. They have to be a go-getter. You have to get things done. You can't be passive. You have to be a very active person. In fact, when we are looking at applications, that's why we are looking at other things they have done. I mean, somebody said, okay, I went and did a startup. That kind of gives a person this, okay, this person might be able to do research because he has this kind of positive, I can go get things done attitude in that. You have to have a lot of critical thinking because you have to think through the problems in there. You have to be able to self-sustain, self-plan, go execute these things. So you have to have the intelligence and the ability, you have to have enough tools. I think a lot of people say PhD is like 90% sweat and 10% intelligence. So I think the key thing is to be ready to kind of just work hard. I think it's about passion. I mean, PhD is not easy. I mean, because it's hard because if you know what you're doing, if you can see the end of the tunnel, it's not a PhD. One thing that one of my colleagues said that about research, the difference between research and if you are doing industry job is in industry job, somebody gives a problem, you have to solve it. In a research job, you find a problem, you try to solve it. You have two choices, either solve the problem or change the problem. Okay, if the problem seems too hard, too easy, you can always change the problem. That's the interesting thing about research, because nobody is going to hold you saying you didn't solve that problem, because we are trying to do something new. Part of research is also communication. That means you have to write about things, you have to talk about it, so a good researcher has to be a good communicator. So developing some of the communication skills is essential. In application process, we see the writing skills, the ability to write. But when you get here, you'll see the other communication skills. That's also essential. I think they have to have a good presence, because a good researcher is somebody who can tell people, okay, this is what I did. One more thing I will add is, a lot of times when I see international applications, people are very worried about funding. But as you see, a lot of these top programs, if you get admitted, you have funding. So don't worry about funding, especially if you looking at top schools. Almost all the fields will have TA-ships, RA-ships, fellowships, and stuff like that. And so it's all about getting admitted. So focus on that aspect.
I'd like to thank Professor Saman for sharing with us some great insight.
You're welcome, and good luck everybody, and I hope I get to see some of you at MIT in next couple of years.